Hi everyone, I'm Justin, and what I wanted to focus on here is health in Taiwan. I was there for about 2 months, and this presentation is obviously going to be coming from the perspective of an American. And the reputation of health in America is not the shiniest right now, especially when you think about the actions of the recent administration. So I might not have been in the US for those past 2 months, but I was reading the news on occasion, and I think the dissonance of reading about it while not being there, knowing I'll return to now live in it, was an interesting experience. All right. Anyways, back to our regular program. I'm going to talk about some obvious observations I've had about health over there. Out of all the adventures I've had are all around the island of Taiwan, I've seen a lot more elderly people out and about, and that's not because Taiwan is a nation with a huge proportion of elderly. In fact, the proportion of elderly between Taiwan and the US is really similar. I think it's actually the active lifestyles that's encouraged by design that helps elderly people stay fit enough to be outside on their own, unlike a lot of elderly in the US who regularly need to stay in nursing homes for physical therapy. And on the left is an example of the situation in the US, and it's where I used to work. I actually know both of those people. On the right is a picture I took at the park of two people using the equipment. All right. Unlike many cities in the US, life in Taiwan is not wholly car dependent. Cities are really walkable, and that's seen for two factors. One, the paths are convenient, and the public transport is great for everything else that isn't in walking distance. So, restaurants, convenience stores, shopping areas, and other goods and services are usually within a walking distance from residences, hotels. This is what I experienced when staying at an Airbnb that was in a residential area and in hotels during class time. Compared to the US, the walkways in Taiwan are really wide. They reliably exist, so they're usually always there. And they're usually shaded by trees or like building overhangs or canopies. Safety is really important, and all three of those factors contribute to safety. The walkways are sufficiently wide, so they put distance between you and the traffic. And in the US, no one likes when you walk down a sidewalk and the sidewalk just ends. So now you have to turn around, which wastes your time, or you can keep going, but now you're in the street, which is unsafe. And the shade is actually really important, especially for elderly and children. Both are populations that can't regulate their body temperature as efficiently. So the shade provides opportunities for them to cool off, possibly saving them from heat-related illnesses like heat stroke, which is so important for a country that's halfway in a tropical zone. I don't know why the video's not popping up. There we go. The public transport system is insanely robust, and I've managed to go up and down the island with pretty little frustration. And that's not a flex. It genuinely is just that easy. The combined rail and bus system is so widespread and consistently available that a car is just not necessary. Most of the time, I can walk up to the train platform or bus station, and between half a minute to a minute later, it'll arrive and I can continue my way. Sometimes it will be a few minutes, which is a little longer, but it's really not a big deal. And on the right pictured, I purposely waited for the train to leave just to see how long the next one would take. It was just in 5 minutes. And this wasn't even the busiest line, and it wasn't at that close to the city center either. So maybe the times are even shorter in other places. But the point is that the public transport system is super convenient and cheap. And the amount someone pays can depend on, like, are they paying per trip? Are they using their card, or what city they're in? But in Taipei, which is where I spend most of my time, it was really cheap. And the monthly pass made it around $1 a day for as many trips as you wanted to take in that day. And the Metro card was pretty similar. It was only like 60 cents a trip. And I say all this to say that the public transport there is really awesome and you can rely on it whether you are a tourist or a resident. The walkability of cities in Taiwan contributes a lot to the health of its residents. In the US, a lot of people, including myself, actively try to get 10,000 steps a day because that's a popular marker for cardiovascular health. And most of the time, we live a pretty sedentary lifestyle. We're at home sitting around, sitting in our cars when we drive, we're sitting when we're working, or during our leisure when we like go out to eat at restaurants or go to the movies. It's really sedentary. We just sit a lot. A lot of people are just simply not getting enough activity here in the US. And after the first week in Taiwan, I saw myself consistently getting above 10,000 steps a day without having to actively go outside with that goal in mind. It's just not something I'd worry about. And I knew my heart health would be pretty much fine just doing day-to-day stuff. One aspect of design I wanted to highlight was how helpful many like parts of these little bits of infrastructure are, especially to elderly people. And that probably makes a lot more sense that when I introduced that, like I have worked in a nursing home before. It's me on the left. And I really liked seeing the mobility aids and emergency buttons in the public toilets. It's the exact setup of bathrooms in a nursing home I worked at. And it's really important because both of these things protect against falling and it can help bring aid to people who have fallen. And falling is the number one cause of injury and injury related deaths in elderly. Not everyone is going to be normally abled. So besides just elderly people, if they have some sort of injury or physical disability, it's really important to have these things to help and protect them. Some other parts of design I wanted to highlight are the green spaces that are absolutely everywhere around the city. There are so many parks with plenty of shade, and these are community spaces for exercise and just interactions and relationships for people of all ages. There's equipment for kids, for adults, like these red bikes on the bottom right, and people with more limited mobility, which you see in all these other pictures. The wooden benches on the top left are actually used for exercising mobility, and these skate rinks that I saw them being called in Google Maps on the bottom left, I've often seen wheelchair users and their family using the rails in that circle as like handholds to help them walk around, just get some physical therapy in. And if you go out to any of these parks early enough in the morning from like 5 to 6 a.m., you'll see large groups of elderly people outside just exercising together, which is just a great example of the culture providing community and improving the health of their members. One aspect of culture I think particularly contributes to health is health-seeking behaviors, especially represented by these dried goods shops. TCM or traditional Chinese medicine is a pretty popular topic that I think is accepted, but also gets dunked on in a lot of like Western contexts. I personally think that even though it's a little old-fashioned, I think it's a net positive because being health conscious is one of the first steps to having an actually healthier lifestyle, whether or not you personally believe in the benefits that TCM touts. While there are many ethnic identities here in Taiwan, a vast majority of them identify under Han Chinese. So unsurprisingly, TCM exists here pretty prevalently, and there are tons of shops selling dried goods that claim to improve aspects of health. Speaking of old fashioned, it's time to delve into some less positive parts of health here in Taiwan, which is obesity and smoking. According to recent demographic reports, about half of Taiwan is considered obese or overweight, and smoking, just from personal observation, is still pretty prevalent. According to those demographics, the demographics the researchers that analyze those demographics, it usually comes from a lack of understanding regarding obesity and its health effects further down the line. This might sound surprising, especially when you've walked around Taiwan, which is why I'd like to share this minor caveat that while less people are considered obese slash overweight in the US compared to Taiwan, there is a greater percentage of morbid obesity in the US compared to Taiwan. Regardless, I think a larger contributing factor is an old, outdated diet culture that focuses too much on what you eat versus how much you eat. There's no amount of fruit, raw vegetables, supplements, tea, or any other health food that you consume that is going to magically get rid of fat unless you are in a caloric deficit. Additionally, just through conversations with Peter and observation, smoking is pretty common here. It's not just older people, but younger as well, as seen on the picture on the left. There are proportionally less smokers in the US, and as far as I know, we don't actually have these pictures of like the effects of smoking on cigarette packages. So I'm just chalking that up to social culture in Taiwan, as the US did used to have a lot of smokers, but now people are really averse to it. Okay. That's not to say that these problems aren't getting tackled and there aren't solutions. I didn't go to grocery stores because I didn't have a kitchen, so I mostly stayed in convenience stores. But there are there's this whole rack of like lean sources of protein. There's like chicken, tofu, there's fruit there, and there's pretty decently balanced snacks and meals too. So there are options for these problems, but Taiwan just has a culture of having really delicious food for pretty cheap. And of course, social smoking that persists both obesity and the smoking issue. I can really attest to this point that this culture just has really good food. I did gain a good bit of weight on this trip, but I was also a tourist, so that's my excuse for now. All in all, I just want to say that the way Taiwanese culture has built society while having some weaker points has made it relatively easy to be healthy, and I absolutely love that. All right. 谢谢大家. Thank you.